Hi, I'm Eric Westrich with Aquilius. We're here with Robert Fremeau, who's founder and CEO of BrainStorm Therapeutics, and we're talking about complex brain diseases and solutions, but we're really talking about Robert and finding out how he got involved in this whole thing anyway, where that started, and where he's going with it now. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. I'm delighted to be here. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
Now, I don't know too many things that are more complicated than the brain. That's why we have a whole symposium just on mental health and brain technology. Um, so when you're trying to take something like that and decipher pieces and do something about it, there's a lot of paths to get people there. When did you become interested in the brain? Was that something you stumbled onto, or did you see something that, take us back the first time you remember being passionate about the brain?
Yeah.
What was that conversation like?
Well, when I went to college, I was pretty convinced I was going to be a marine scientist. Um, I had a strong interest in bacteriology. I ended up getting an undergraduate degree in microbiology, and I wanted to become a marine microbiologist. And I decided to take a break before going to graduate school, and I ended up taking a job as a technician working in a laboratory for a new professor at George Washington University, a guy named Terry Moody. And he had been involved in discovering that a lot of the peptides that are involved in regulating the GI tract, digestion, and those kind of processes were also found in the brain. And he teased me that it was clear I always think about my brain through my stomach. And so anyway, I worked in his lab as a technician, and I actually ended up finishing like 2/3 of my Ph.D. before I was ever formally admitted to the program. So I discovered a receptor in the brain for the peptide hormone secretin, and that really captured my interest, and I really became quite excited about working in neuroscience. And it's clear that the brain is really the last frontier, the last big black box in modern biology. And I wanted to play some role in understanding how synapses work and how that gives rise to the mind and behavior. So I did my PhD in biochemistry.
Was it really that mentor and that lab experience that let you really understand the power of this knowledge and what you could do with it, or was it kind of an accumulated thing? Was that
Yeah, a lot of it is really curiosity and, frankly, the thrill of discovery. To be the first person to ever know something is a very powerful, addictive thing for a person that's curious and wants to know how things work. So when I discovered that there was a receptor in the brain for the GI hormone secretin, and I was the first person ever to know that, it was a thrilling, exciting feeling, and it becomes sort of an addictive driving force to want to continue making those kind of discoveries.
Well, the brain is a pretty complex terrain. If you think of all the explorers in the world, there's lots of places to go in the brain that nobody's been before or that people don't understand. So if sounds like you're an explorer, and if you're an explorer, the brain is a pretty wide and interesting terrain to do. So going with so much of your work done before you can get admitted is a pretty strong place that most of us wish we would have had.
Yeah. Well, I'm dating myself now, but when I made the decision to choose where to go for a postdoc, I ended up going to Columbia University in New York City. And for me, the excitement was that I'm dating myself now, but really molecular biology was just being applied to understanding how the brain works and identifying the receptors and transporters and enzymes involved in making neurotransmitters was a super exciting area for me at the time. And I joined the lab of a guy named Jim Roberts. And Jim had discovered that there's one polyhormone precursor, one gene that's transcribed to make one big precursor protein, but that precursor protein makes two different biologically active peptides, beta endorphin, the opioid peptide, and ACTH, the peptide that drives the production of glucocorticoids in the adrenal gland. And in the brain, it's processed to make beta endorphin, and the pituitary is processed to make ACTH. And I wanted to understand how the gene regulation occurred and how beta endorphin functioned in the brain. That was really exciting for me to go do my postdoc there.
So there's a lot of skills you have to do what you do. I mean, it's not like one skill set. There's all kinds of skill sets. And did all that come easy for you, or was there one thing that was particularly challenging for you to climb that mountain to get where you are today? Was there one skill set that was really hard, scary, or painful to you to get there?
During my training period, not really. I actually was involved in inventing new technologies. I developed a method where we can study gene transcription in single cells by a technology called in situ hybridization. And so I was very excited about learning these new technologies. And it's only been in the more recent part of my career that I'm finding it to be actually kind of intimidating. It's much harder to go back and learn new areas now. And so right now, we're building this platform in my current company that I founded, BrainStorm Therapeutics, where we're able to take patient-derived induced pluripotent stem cells and make microbrain organoids, little pieces of three-dimensional tissue that are just like a cortical organoid from a human brain. And so we're applying now both the experimental work to be able to screen those organoids to find drugs, but we're also using an AI machine learning computational biology approach to try to understand how the disease gene networks work. And for me, the whole field of data science really evolved long after I left my academic training. And so now I'm having to go back and sort of relearn. I'm really good at asking the questions, but then having to identify the AI machine learning technologies to address these questions is humbling, to say the least.
You talked about why a brainstorm therapeutics need to exist. Was that because nobody was doing this at all? Were you the first one?
Yeah, it's a super important question, Eric, and it really involves sort of the next step I followed after I spent 10 years on the faculty at Duke University in the departments of pharmacology and neurobiology, and I went on sabbatical to University of California, San Francisco, and I was involved in the first molecular cloning and characterization of the receptors and transporters for the biogenic amine and amino acid neurotransmitters. One of my claims to fame is I cloned the serotonin transporter, which is the target for SSRI antidepressants. And so I've always had an interest in being able to practically apply what I discovered in the lab to actually try to find ways of improving human health. And so after I finished my academic career, I took a job as a scientific director at Amgen, where I spent 10 years leading our drug discovery in neurodegenerative disorders. And over the course of 10 years, my colleagues and I advanced over a dozen compounds into the clinic. And they all failed. Mm-hmm. They all failed due to lack of efficacy. And it became clear to me that the way we're doing drug discovery, especially in the brain, is flawed, that we can't possibly expect an animal model can be a good predictor of efficacy of a drug in a human brain. And it became clear to me we had to find a way of developing new translational models that could be used to get efficacy in a human disease setting at the very beginning of a drug discovery process. And that's where the idea of being able to use patient-derived induced pluripotent stem cells to make these little microbrain organoids that are little living pieces of human brain in a dish that you can then study the disease mechanisms, you can identify the potential therapeutic targets and do drug screening. And so by using clinically translatable screening endpoints, we can find compounds that work in a human disease setting at the very beginning of a drug discovery process, bypassing the need for animal models and really de-risking clinical translation. And we refer to it as the clinical translational valley of death. More than 90% of compounds fail between showing efficacy in a preclinical model and then failing in phase 1 or phase 2 in the clinic. So by developing these brain organoids, we can bypass that translational valley of death.
So the journey from student researcher to student to employee Amgen is pretty clear, but that journey from Amgen to CEO and founder, that's not such a clear path.
Yeah.
What made you crazy enough to think that you wanted to do that?
So as a Ph.D. working for a large biotech or pharma company, when you discover a target and you validate it and you lead the program all the way through to developing a clinical candidate, you've got to throw it over the wall. And the physicians catch it and go on to do the proof of concept studies in the clinic. And I dearly wanted to have a higher level strategic role, seeing my discoveries all the way through to the patient clinical work. And it was never going to be possible doing that as a PhD scientist in a large biotech or pharma company. So I threw caution to the wind and I left Amgen and started my own consulting company where I began to interact with smaller companies doing drug discovery, and wanted to find a way that I could actually really have a soup to nuts role all the way from target discovery all the way through to designing the phase 2 clinical trial that show efficacy, and all the way through to developing a market of medicine. I want kind of my legacy and capstone of my career to have advanced medicine onto the market for brain disorders. And we've made some exciting progress along those lines since I founded BrainStorm Therapeutics. But it really was having the confidence and belief in myself that I could find a better translational model that led me to throw caution to the wind and leave Amgen. And so I took a role as a chief scientific officer at a biotech company called Viant Bio. And at Viant Bio, we developed these iPSC disease models for rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. And unfortunately, Viant Bio fell victim to the capital funding crisis. And I kept convincing the board of directors we just needed 6 more months to be able to have the traction to help get more funding, but the board didn't want to risk having the company go bankrupt, so they ended up pulling the plug. And so I took that opportunity to start BrainStorm in March of 2023 to continue the work that I had begun at Viant Bio. And we've actually been able to advance now a compound into phase 2 clinical trials in the rare genetic disorder called Rett syndrome, through the work that we did at Viant Bio with a very talented team that have now spread to the 4 corners of the earth. And so we're now.
So obviously you needed some new skill sets to do that. You had to add on to whatever you knew to move into the role as founder and CEO. What is the one thing that most surprised you that you didn't know before when you came into this new environment? Some things you knew you were getting into. What most surprised you when you came into that new role? Something you didn't expect or didn't know that you needed to know or were surprised?
It really is the challenges of fundraising, to be able to raise funds to be able to grow and support a team. And so I have to sign the monthly payroll checks now. And it's humbling and daunting, right? And so for me, raising seed funding has really been one of the most eye-opening and challenging experiences now. So we've been very successful. We've gotten non-dilutive government grant funding. We have an NSF SBIR grant for our work on Parkinson's disease drug discovery, and we're applying for a couple of grants in January to continue working on our work in Alzheimer's disease and Rett syndrome and CDKL5 disorder. But it's the fundraising is really the hard part, and my responsibility to the people that I've recruited to the team to help do this pioneering work is part of the thing that keeps me awake at night sometimes.
Okay, so obviously that's the very necessary, but not as much fun part. What's the most fun you have at work?
Well, we just did what I think we just completed what I think is a very interesting and pioneering study now, where we can actually marry AI with drug discovery in a brain organoid. And so, Parkinson's disease is the second most common neurodegenerative disorder, affecting more than 10 million patients worldwide. And there are medicines that are symptomatic therapies that can partially improve the motor functions in Parkinson's disease, but they lose activity over time as dopamine neurons continue to die. And so we wanted to find a way where we could apply machine learning and AI approach to try to understand the underlying disease processes that lead to the death of a dopamine neuron. And so we were able to do that. Now, we actually, at this stage of my life, I did my first hackathon. And so my colleagues, Jun Yin and Maya Gustillo and I put together a team, and we took part in the Lux Capital Bio XML hackathon. And so we used that hackathon period to define a foundation model now using brain organoid expression data with known data from Parkinson brains to put together a foundation model which has identified several novel targets that are relevant to Parkinson's disease. And we've made what really is I think a paradigm shifting foundational discovery that the seeds of destruction in a dopamine neuron are already planted at birth, and they manifest themselves, many, many years later, 30, 40, 50 years old, as death of dopamine neurons. And so our foundation model has predicted the pathway by which these neurons die, and it begins way before people ever thought possible. So for me, again, it's the thrill of developing new technologies, applying them to important biological problems, and making discoveries. So
I'm happy for that hackathon. Then I started the first hackathon for $1 billion software company I worked for, and surprising enough, that's how I ended up at Aquilius. I won a hackathon, and the
no way.
prizes, some prize money, but it was also a couple months at Aquilius, and I just ended up staying there. So,
fantastic. Well, we didn't get a cash prize, but we got an award of many, many hours using the AWS cloud, which we need. And so we have, up to about 100K worth of cloud time with AWS, which means we can do that without having to spend it ourselves. So it's super exciting.
And that is pretty important. I mean, Aquilius, our job is the conversations we have is how do you get people fully funded through any means. So you're rapidly chasing that. The other one is fully resourced. One of the newest things adding to the resource that we found companies need is just what you said, is that cloud and AI infrastructure. Because people don't realize how much power you need to do really good AI. It's not free. Even if you write the software, you still have. So cloud infrastructure is one of those functions we're doing.
Yeah. So as part of this hackathon, we won a prize from NVIDIA. We won the NVIDIA prize for the best platform. And we were able to use their A100 GPUs to do all of our fine tuning work. And we actually just had our meeting with them today. They're writing a blog post now about our award and our actual discoveries during the hackathon. So we're super excited about that and hoping it's going to help us with our funding efforts.
But when are you going to sponsor your first hackathon? Is that coming up? Can we look for that in the future using your brain organoids?
I think there's a high likelihood that could happen within the next 2 years. Right now, one of the interesting things that are being done are people are actually being able to use organoids now to build little microprocessor computers that can make yes/no decisions. And so they may end up becoming super powerful, almost quantum-like computers, right?
Yeah, biocomputer part of the mix.
For sure.
Quantum computers solve different problems. So people don't realize they're not the same as regular computers. They don't do the same thing, just faster. They do things differently because they look at the world different, and bio looks at the world completely different too. It's not like one is going to replace the other. They solve different problems.
Yep.
So is there something you think we haven't mentioned? I think we've covered what you're excited about the future, what you love about your job, what's hard about your job, how you got there. Is there anything you think we haven't said that everybody should know?
Well, I think for me, the comment that Elon Musk made, which was that founding a company is like eating glass, is true. It's very painful. But once you start, you can't stop. And so I think the real secret sauce for success is really perseverance and unwillingness to accept no, and finding a way to persevere under challenging circumstances and ways of being able to circumvent the no's.
Well, one of my acquaintances, the kind of guy that succeeded enough to have his own private jet and things like that, he said, I'm feeling really good now. I only feel like quitting once a day. That's how he knew. He said he was successful. I only feel like quitting once a day now. That stuck with me. That there's some hard. If you don't like doing hard, then you definitely don't want to start your own company. It's just hard.
Yeah. One of the things that's challenging for me, though, is, I love the work I did at the bench, and I miss doing bench work. And so it's hard to let go of that. But I've been very lucky to, so far, put together an exceptionally talented team. We're only a team of 3 now, but my colleague Jun Yin, who is our chief technology officer, he and I share an Amgen background. We didn't overlap, but he came from that Amgen background that has that drug discovery experience. And he was a member of the genome analysis unit at Amgen. Really the first, as far as I'm aware, the first real pharma level genome analysis unit that was applying these breakthroughs in data science to doing drug discovery. And June was involved in helping do target discovery by applying AI applications. And we also just made our first hire. We hired a newly minted Ph.D., a woman, Maya Gostillo, who was a PhD graduate from Jean Yo's lab at UCSD, one of the really top labs at the university. And so I think we're incredibly lucky now to have a really talented team. And I think we're asking the right questions. And I think we have a lot of room for doing some really exciting, important work and hopefully putting some medicines on the market for these terrible unmet diseases of the brain.
So, Robert, now is the time for the most important question, which is if somebody wants to learn more about you or BrainStorm Therapeutics, where is the absolute best place for them to go to find out more?
I think a starting point, we have a website, our company website, and it's basically www.brainstormtherapeutics.org. Not .com, but .org. It turned out when I went to register my domain, .com was already taken. And they wanted, thousands of dollars for me to buy it back. And I said, well, forget that. I'll do .org. So www.brainstormtherapeutics.org. And on that website is my contact information, my email address and phone number. People can feel free to text me or email me and would really enjoy following up.
And of course, the best way to find out more about you is to go to the Mental Health and Brain Tech Symposium where they can meet you in person. And they'll get a chance to hear you talk. We'll take a break. They'll see some companies pitch real quick. But then the most important part is the networking. Great people, great conversations, great food. And so I encourage everybody to attend in person as you can, because we probably have more people attending virtually than in person because they come from all over the world. But the virtual part does not include the eating, drinking, and networking.
Yeah.
We're trying to.
Well, Eric, we're actually double dipping. I'm giving a talk cleverly titled "Lost in Translation: Leveraging Human Brain Organoids for Therapeutic Discovery." But we're also doing a pitch later on that day. So there'll be two opportunities to hear from BrainStorm.
Very good. Again, everybody, thanks for watching. Robert Fremeau, CEO and founder of BrainStorm Therapeutics at .org. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much, Eric. Enjoyed it. See you next week.